Now we're going to have some real fun because we're going to start mastering our Cubase project, and I'm going to show you my method for making a professional sounding master that can compete with anything that you hear on the radio, because Cubase comes with all of the plugins that you're going to need to do just that. So we're going to go back to our mix console by typing F3 on our computer keyboard, and then we've already talked about the importance of the stereo output channel. And let's do all of the mastering inside of the channel settings window. Again, we could do it inside of the racks, but because I have to use this kind of low monitor resolution, let's go into the channel settings by clicking the Edit Channel Settings button, which is that E button, and that takes us to this big window for the channel settings. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is this clip indicator. You'll notice there's this big red box at the bottom of the stereo output channel. Now that clipping indicator is very important. You never want to see the clipping indicator during the export process or during the mixdown process, because if you do, it means that the export that you're going to make is going to be clipped or distorted. And so you'll notice that the actual output of that channel has hit 9.2 dB above zero. Anything above zero is going to be clipping, and we want to minimize that clipping as much as possible. So you would think that it's just a matter of moving the fader up and down, but I'll tell you, one of the things I love to do is just set the master fader at the 0 dB point, and that's done by hitting Control or Command and then clicking on the fader. So that gets the fader right to 0 dB, but now I've really turned the volume up. So how do I get the signal coming into this channel a little bit more tame? And to do that, I'm going to come over to the pre section. The pre section has a setting for the pre-gain. And since we knew that we were about 9 dB above zero, too loud and clipping, I'm going to turn that down to about minus 9 dB below zero. And that'll even out that fader setting so that I don't clip the fader. So if I were to press play now and monitor that clip indicator, I shouldn't see it. And you'll notice that now we're down to about minus 2.4 dB below zero. We'll let it play here for a little bit and keep monitoring that. But the clip indicator here isn't on. You'll notice that the clip indicator over on the mix console is not on because it's the same light. And in the transport panel, there's another clip indicator for the stereo output channel right here. So if you ever see the stereo output channel is clipping, it's a really important thing to adjust either the fader on the stereo output channel, or what I like to do is adjust that pre-gain control on the pre-section of the channel settings window. So now that I've done that, you'll notice that we got very close to clipping, but not clipping. So we were minus 1 dB below zero. That's a perfect setting to start mastering. And the reason that we do that is we don't want to hit these mastering plugins really, really hard. We want to give them a nice amount of room to breathe and really work their magic. So now that I have the pre-gain set, I'm going to come over to our inserts and I'm going to install a multiband compressor. Now before I add that, let me tell you that whenever I'm mastering pop music, I have these three adjectives in my head. I'm looking for something that's punchy, shiny, and loud. And without going into a big dissertation on what those three adjectives really represent, those are the things that my clients tell me that they want their music to sound like. You know, we want our music to sound punchy and shiny and loud. So I'm going to start with the punchy aspect, and that's a compressor. And Cubase has a really awesome multiband compressor. So when you click on that first slot, you can come down to the dynamics category, and then I'm going to scroll up here a little bit with my mouse wheel, and I'm going to click on multiband compressor. That loads the multiband compressor into the first insert slot, and the control panel for the multiband compressor will also appear. And just to show you how to get that back, if you were to close that control panel and you wanted to get it back at any time, just double click on the slot and that will reveal the control panel. Now let's quickly listen to some presets, because that's a great way to get some ideas for your mastering. So I've got my left and right locators set, and I've rewound to the very beginning of the project by typing 1 on my numeric keypad, and I have the cycle mode on so that this project will just keep going round and round. But let's listen to some different presets. So you'll notice that when you single click on any of these presets, it will load the preset into the multiband compressor. And what I kind of liked was the Rockmaster number 2. So let's go with that. I'm going to double click on that. That will load the Rockmaster 2 preset into the multiband compressor. Now, a multiband compressor is a highly specialized dynamic processor. A normal compressor works on all frequencies simultaneously, whereas a multiband compressor splits those frequencies into 4 separate bands. We have lows, low mids, high mids, and highs. And let me show you how each of these compressors work. I'm going to start playback, and then we're going to listen to each band. So I'm going to come down to the low compressor right here, low frequency compressor, and click on the solo button. If you have good speakers or a subwoofer, you'll just hear the rumbliness. So those are all the low frequencies, like the fundamental of the bass guitar and the bass drum. If I come to the low mid band, then I get some of the fundamentals of the higher frequency sounds, like the vocal tracks and the electric piano. The high mid frequencies is all of the defining frequencies of those other tracks, like the vocals and guitar. And then the ultra high frequencies here are just the pick noise of the acoustic guitar and some of the sibilance of the vocals. So I like this setting, but there's one thing I want to do. I want to drop the output volume back to 0 dB. And to do that, I'm going to hold Control or Command and click on that control. That sets the output level to 0 dB. I really don't want this multiband compressor to add a lot of volume. I just want it to add some of that really nice smoothing compression to the entire mix of our project. And then I am losing a little bit of the low-mid frequencies. So here's the low-mid frequency gain control, so I'm going to turn that up a bit. That sounds more balanced to me. And now we can use the power button either on the control panel of the multiband compressor, or there's a power button over on the insert slot to audition before and after. So I'm going to shut up for a second and do the power button so you can hear before and after. Now, we could use this little button, which is the bypass effect button, and that won't have you hearing that gap in between. So it works very much like the power button, but the bypass effect button is only visible on the control panel. It's not visible over here, but there's another way to bypass the inserts, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But you could use this to monitor before and after as well. So I like what that compressor's doing. The next thing I want to do is I want to EQ a few of the frequencies that I'm hearing that I'm not really agreeing with. So I'm going to watch the spectrum analysis on this real-time analyzer to look at the frequencies in this project. And I kind of want to bring out a little bit more of the high-mid frequencies in between about 2 kilohertz and 5 kilohertz. So I'm going to click on that little line. Let me turn it up way too loud so you can hear the frequencies. And I just want to bring a little bit of that out. I'm going to get rid of a little bit of those ultra high frequencies. So here's the EQ bypass button so we can hear before. And after. And that sounds nice. Now there's one other really nice thing that I could add to the stereo output channel that I've already applied to some of my other tracks, and that is some tape saturation effect. And the tape saturation is in the channel strip. You remember that if you look at the signal flow of the strip, we have the gate, compressor, and then the EQ position. So once the signal leaves the EQ position, it goes into these other slots, and one of them is the saturation slot. So I'm going to come over here to the channel strip settings, where I can look at all of them at the same time, and I'm going to load up the tape saturation. This again is an analog tape physical model. It sounds really good, and there's hardly anything you really need to do to this, including turning up the drive. It just sounds really good, even with the drive set to 0. Let's start the project, and I can show you how this sounds before and after. It's a very subtle effect, but it just adds some more oomph, if you will. It sounds like tape, and tape has a very musical quality to it. So I'm just going to turn that drive up to about 2 dB, leave the tape saturation effect on. So I've done the punchy and shiny part of our mastering. Now I'm going to do the loud portion. This is really easy, but I'm going to come back to the inserts, and on the 7th slot, and remember that these 7th and 8th slots come after the fader of the stereo output channel. In slot number 7, I'm going to add a maximizer. So that's also located in the dynamics category. I'm going to scroll down here with my mouse wheel and choose maximizer. And the controls here are quite easy. All you have to do is enter a somewhat small negative number into the output control, like minus 0.2 dB, and then the optimize control just determines how loud the master output is going to be. The more you turn up the optimize, the louder it's going to get, but you can overdo it. So, and we'll go over that in just a moment. But let's listen to some different optimize settings on our project. And you'll notice also, just quickly before I start, during the mastering process, I did get to a point where I clipped the output. But another nice thing about the maximizer plugin is that it will stop any clipping above 0 dB and get it down to minus 0.2 dB. So I'm going to click on that clip indicator again, and now that we have the maximizer in line, we won't ever see that clipping indicator. So I'm going to press play again, and let's listen to the maximizer. Now that I have the maximizer on, it does get a lot louder, but I'm noticing that EQ is a little bright right here, so. So now let's listen to the before and after of all of our plugins. On the insert slots, there's a master bypass on all the inserts, so let's turn that off. Turn the EQ off. Now we're listening to the before, so this is what we have been listening to during the mix process. You can really hear what all of those mastering plugins are doing. It's really making the project radio ready. So let me talk a little bit more about the maximizer. This is what determines your loudness of the final output. But how loud is too loud? Well, in the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the loudness meter to make that determination.